Walter Francis White was born on July 1st, 1893 in Atlanta, Georgia. The second of Madeline and George White's 7 children, he had an older brother and 5 younger sisters. The family lived on Houston Street, the recognized border between Atlanta's black and white communities. Although the area had deteriorated over the years, the Whites' 8-room, 2-story house stood as a testimony to their industry. George White, a mail carrier, regularly repainted it and kept the lawn neatly trimmed and the picket fence whitewashed. Inside, former school teacher Madeline White, a stickler for cleanliness, washed, dusted, and polished every object within her reach, from dining room table to untidy child. It was not easy to raise a family on a postman's small salary, but the Whites were resourceful people. George White supplemented his wages by renting out a little house he had built on his property, and Madeline White managed the household budget with care and skill. None of the children, Walter White said later, ever noticed a lack of money. The Whites' pale skin did present them with problems, however. Just as their home stood midway between the white and black districts of Atlanta, their skin color placed them midway between the two races. Like the rest of the South, Atlanta required blacks to sit in the back of the streetcars. But when Walter and his family sat in the black section, they received incredulous stares and insulting remarks from the whites at the front of the cars. On the other hand, if they sat in the white section, black neighbors criticized them for trying to pass. After years of struggling with this problem, George White made one of his few extravagant purchases and one of his few concessions to bigotry. He bought a horse and buggy to transport his family in peace. Every day after school, Walter joined his family on his mail route. Perched on the buggy seat, the two engaged in a long-running series of formal debates, which demanded careful strategy and informed argument. Whenever Walter seemed hazy about his subject, his father sent him to the church library. These daily intellectual games taught the boy how to think clearly and how to form a valid argument.
Walter White could very well, with his light skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, he could have chosen to live his life with the privilege that comes from being a white person. But he chose to be true to his heritage. And he also chose to use those features to have an impact on history and to change race relations in America. So disguised as a white person, as a white journalist, he would go into Klan meetings. And he would go into meetings in which plots were being made to do the dirty deed. And he dedicated his life to fighting against lynching. He was an anti-lynching crusader, and as a result of his commitment, lynching began to decline as a crime, the heinous crime that it was. Walter White, in one of those choices that he made, brought the dean of Howard University School of Law, Charles Hamilton Houston, and asked him to head up the whole effort, the whole NAACP strategy for fighting segregation in education. And it was that choice of Charles Hamilton Houston, who became a mentor for Thurgood Marshall and many young lawyers of his time, that helped to produce one of the NAACP's landmark achievements, and that is the legislation that led to Brown versus Board of Education. So as we look at what it is we need to do as mentors, as parents, as citizens, help our young people to understand the real value of choice and challenge and commitment. Thank you very much.
As long as I am a member of this board, I pledge my word here today that I shall fight for the rights of these men. I shall cast my vote against every move that tries to take away from them what is theirs. In the end, the school board backed down and agreed to keep the black school's 7th grades. The decision heartened White and his associates. Inexperienced, few in number, and equipped with little more than determination, they had faced an entrenched, hostile majority and won their point, but they were still a long way from winning their battle for equality.
Thank you so much. I would now like to introduce Mr. Jerry Florence, representative from AARP, another
sponsors. It's hard following Dr. Hooks and Mr. White's daughter, but I wanted to give you a little insight why AARP is so proud to be a sponsor and be a part of this. And as I looked at the history of Walter White, he was a very prolific writer. And as a matter of fact, in his autobiography, The Man Called White, he wrote something that really touched me and I think represents what AARP represents. And today it is all about Walter White. His legacy is inspiring, especially his goal, as you heard about, abolishing lynching, and his outstanding leadership, as you heard, of the NAACP. But in his autobiography, he relates a story that, to me, talks about heart and courage and what this is all about. And let me just give you this story real quickly. He relates how he grew up from a 13-year-old boy to be a man one night in Atlanta, Georgia, standing by his father's side, a gun in his hand. He was ready to defend their home and the family against an angry white mob. But the mob dispersed before White or his father fired a single shot. Walter White reflected, "I put my gun aside and tried to relax. I was gripped by the knowledge of my identity, and in the depths of my soul, I was vaguely aware that I was glad of it. I was sick with loathing from the hatred which had flared before me that night and come so close to making me a killer, but I was glad I was not one of those who hated. I was glad I was not one of those made sick and murderous by pride." Now this is a man we honor today. You've heard, a giant of civil rights, guiding the NAACP and championing political, economic, and social rights of African Americans and every American. You know, Walter White had the ear of Franklin Roosevelt. He also had the support and friendship of Eleanor Roosevelt. He was respected by the Congress, admired by colleagues. Walter White was one incredible man.
The Constitution's 13th Amendment abolished slavery, and federal law expressly prohibited peonage, the use of laborers bound by debt. Phillips County landowners, however, have been freely practicing peonage and near slavery for decades. Aware of their rights and desperate to improve their wretched lot, a group of black Phillips County sharecroppers banded together in 1919. The sharecroppers pooled what little money they had, hired two sympathetic white attorneys, and incorporated themselves as the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. Through their association, the farmers hoped to bring cases of tenant abuse before the courts, expose the illegal practices of the landlords, and put an end to their exploitation. The union's first meeting, held in a small county church, drew dozens of anxious sharecroppers and their wives. The first speaker had just climbed to the pulpit when a hail of bullets tore into the church. As the panicked crowd scrambled for safety, their on-scene attackers kept firing, killing and wounding a number of women and men. Knowing of the landowners' fierce opposition to their union, a few of the sharecroppers had brought guns to the meeting. They returned their assailants' fire, mortally wounding one of the white gunmen. News of the episode flashed through the county, but it had become a different story. Rampaging blacks had murdered an innocent white man. Within the hour, armed white mobs swept the countryside, systematically slaughtering every black man, woman, and child they could find. Though the exact total will never be known, the massacre claimed the lives of at least 200 blacks. Survivors who failed to escape into the swamps and woods were rounded up like cattle and subjected to trial by mob. Those who had not joined the farmers' union and who agreed to provide their landlords with a period of free labor were released. Terrified, most of the captured blacks agreed to their captors' terms, but 79 men refused. Promptly indicted for murder and insurrection, these stubborn holdouts went to trial 5 days later. After a speedy hearing, 12 of the 79 received the death sentence, and 67 were given life sentences or 20-year prison terms. It was at this point that Walter White arrived on the scene. Posing as a reporter from a Chicago newspaper, White met with Arkansas Governor Charles H. Braugh. The governor, clearly not a friend to the black cause, railed about the foul lies spread by the infamous NAACP about the good white people of Arkansas. But White acted his part well. When he left the interview, he carried a key to Phillips County, a letter of introduction from the governor describing him as one of the most brilliant newspapermen he had ever met. The letter opened doors all over the county. After gathering data from lawmen, witnesses, and local officials, White spoke to a number of blacks familiar with the situation. Finally, he headed for the county jail, where the sheriff had promised him an interview with the convicted men. On his way, a black man passed him and in an urgent whisper urged White to follow him into the nearby woods. "I don't know what you are down here for," the man said to White, "but I have just heard them talking about you. I mean the white folks, and they say they are going to get you. The way I figure it out is that if the white folks are so against you, you must be a friend of ours." Realizing that his identity had been discovered and that an ambush awaited him, White fled. He took off down the railroad tracks, arrived at the station just as a train was pulling out, and jumped aboard. Shaken and breathless, he managed to convince an inquisitive conductor he had urgent business in Memphis and had not had time to buy a ticket. "But you're leaving, mister, just when the funds are going to be starting," said the trainman. "What'll they do with him?" asked White. "When they get through with him," said the grinning conductor, "he won't pass for white no more." White's account of the Phillips County massacre, published in the Chicago Daily News, brought an unexpected response from the public. Letters of support and donations of money streamed into the NAACP headquarters. Aware that they had no hope of appealing the Arkansas convictions in state courts, White and his colleagues turned to the federal court. After a 4-year battle, during which Arkansas 3 times erected gallows for the 12 condemned blacks, the NAACP gained a hearing from the United States Supreme Court. Arguing the case for the NAACP, prominent white attorney Moorfield Story asserted that because the Arkansas trial had been dominated by a mob, the accused men had been denied their constitutional right of due process of the law. An American, insisted Story, is a citizen of both a state and a nation, and the state and federal courts share the responsibility of guarding that citizen's constitutional rights. White and his associates marveled at Stowe's brilliant appeal, but they had little hope that the court would agree. Thus it was to their delighted astonishment when on February 19, 1923, the court reversed the conviction of all 79 men in the Phillips County case. After more than 5 years of struggle against unbelievable odds, exulted White, we had won.
A historic event in NAACP history as possible. We've not done this for a long, long time, only for a couple of years, and we have the Baltimore Great Blacks in Wax to thank for this. Let's give them a big, big round of applause. Somebody said, all history is worth remembering. Some history is not worth repeating. But this is history we want to remember. And by memorializing these civil rights heroes in wax so that future generations can see them and learn about them, I think we're contributing to our mission of justice and freedom and equality. So I'll be back up here at this platform. I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Chairman Bond. I'm sure my board member and my persons presiding this afternoon, Ms. Ophelia Avers, will be here. We're glad that Dr. Hooks have arrived. We were waiting. He was speaking today, so he's here. We will now hear from our president and CEO, Mr. Kwesi Mfume.
Amen. Thank you very much, Ms. Dukes, Chairman Bond, members of the board who are here, the illustrious Benjamin Lawson Hooks, my great predecessor, 17 years our executive director. To all the other people who are here, Jane White, who will be up here, and maybe I should introduce her now, I'll stop, but the other family members that are here for the unveiling of these two wax figures, we're very, very happy that you are a part of this. And to have the opportunity to further memorialize them in a wax figure is really something that we ought to feel proud about. Dr. Joanne Martin will be up before us. Chairman Bond mentioned a moment ago the Great Blacks in the Wax Museum. She is the owner, founder, curator, and the person that helps to make all of this possible by working with this association and others to bring into being these wax figures. I just want to thank you. I hope that you will join us with the oohs and the ahs when the unveiling is done, and that you will take time, if you have not already taken time, to learn more about Walter White, what he meant, what he did, how he lifted this association.
The country, not only black people in this country, not only young people, but also, I'm sorry to tell you, but the NAACP brass itself have forgotten Walter White. His significance to this organization, his steadfastness over a 35-year period, that's something to be proud of, to have given your entire adult life to a cause and to have been so successful at it. Really, I think he was enormously successful, and he was like a man of the future to me. You know, the older I get, the more I look back on what he was and what he represented and what he did, the more of a new man I think he was. You know, almost a man before his time.
Have you seen the wonderful figure yet?
No, I've not seen it yet. I can't wait.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll be
Thank
right
you.
back.
4, 3, 2, 1.
I shall not be long. I know that you expect me to be here for the rest of the afternoon, but in deference to our Vice Chair, Mr. Kwesi Nkrumah, our CEO, and Mr. Julian Brown, we have a dynamic trio headed the NAACP to help you, Brother Kwesi. These are people who are ever moving forward, never backward, ever advancing. They're rock throwers, tree shakers, and jelly makers. Let's give them a great big hand. Kwesi, Julian, and Rob. Of course, they ought to be, because they succeeded Roy Wilkins, Walter White, and Ben Hooks, and they were tree shakers and jelly makers. So you're doing what you have to do, and you're doing it very well. The Marshall family, from the word I got, Brother Johnson, they were not able to be here. I have been in contact with them about a number of things. One of the great privileges of my life to have been associated with Thurgood Marshall, to have met with him as a young lawyer down in Mississippi, Tennessee, Louisiana. They were giving us instruction on things to do. He, Connie Motley, Robert Carter, to have been attorney of record in so many of the early NAACP cases. Thurgood Marshall was surely an authentic legal genius. And because of him and Charles Hamilton Houston and Walter White, by the way, my mother's maiden name is White, and my uncle was Walter. As a young boy, I remember Walter would run out of Memphis on a racial incident. He died. I never had a chance to see him. But I thought one day I might walk where Walter walked, and praise God I did. When I was growing up, Walter White's name was synonymous with Black America. Anything worthwhile, that man spoke it. Thurgood, we're proud of you. To the family of Thurgood Marshall, we'll send a copy of the program to let you know how grateful we are. We still have a long way to go. The words of Thurgood Marshall come down through time. As he made that argument to the Supreme Court. Those 9 white men in their black robes. But the words that he left on their hearts, they could not deal with. For he said that if you decide to continue segregation, if you decide to continue separate but equal, then you are saying that Negroes are different from anybody else in the whole world. And those words were set like a pregnancy on those men, and some died, others were replaced. But on the 17th day of May, as Fraser will tell you, at 12:52, Earl Warren read that unanimous decision outlawing segregation in education. Praise the NAACP. If the president of the New Jersey Council is here, she'd join Hazel. Just give Hazel a red hand.
Introduce Jane White Biaze, whom you've already met. I only met Thurgood Marshall after he had left the court, but when I was a young kid, living at Lincoln University a few miles down the pike, one day Walter White came to speak at Lincoln. And to give you an idea about what an important figure he was in America, not black America, in America then, the governor of Pennsylvania had arranged a police escort for this man. And I remember him pulling onto the Lincoln University campus in a shiny black car, escorted by 4 Pennsylvania state troopers on motorcycles with those shiny leather boots. I tell you, to a young guy, that was impressive. That's the kind of figure he was. Quiet in some ways, bold in others, paved a path through the NAACP, Amen. Helped put us on the road we're still on today, trying to make Hollywood do right by black people. It was Walter White who brought that to the fore, forged the relationship we have with organized labor, the United Auto Workers. Walter White put that in place, and so much more. It's my great, great pleasure to bring his daughter representing the family, Jane White Biaze. Give her a big hand.
Thank you very much. I can't tell you how nice it is to see my daddy again after almost half a century. It was March 1955 when Walter White died. I've prepared some remarks because I hate just kind of rambling on, and I will repeat some of the things that Joanne has already said, but they can be repeated. I am grateful to the artists who crafted this extraordinary work, to the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum of Baltimore for including Walter White in its collection, and I'm certainly grateful to whomever it was who had the historical savvy to think of including him at last in a retrospective exhibit. He, more than most, in my opinion, truly deserves to be honored. Thank you all. To look at this effigy, you might think you were seeing a small white man. Modest, meek perhaps, unassertive, non-controversial. You'd be wrong on all counts. James Weldon Johnson plucked him from his voluntary work with the Atlanta branch of the NAACP because he was feisty, bright, creative, apparently dauntless, and totally dedicated to the causes of the organization and to his own heritage as a black American. At the age of 26, he turned his back on what might have been a relatively safe and lucrative career as a life insurance salesman on his home turf to take a less well-paid and highly dangerous, as it turned out, job with the New York home office of the 10-year-old NAACP. There he used this white skin and the guise of a white man to venture repeatedly into the dangerous, plan-infested Deep South in order to investigate and gather useful information for the organization on lynchings, voter disenfranchisement, education, and citizen violations against black people during the late 20s and 30s. Into the 40s and 50s, right up until his worn-out heart gave out, he was an eloquent persuader a lobbyist without funding, a spearhead for such NAACP actions as the campaign for a federal anti-lynch law, the defeat of a racist Supreme Court nominee, the establishment of a non-segregated military system, and the Brown versus Board of Education decision. He was the man who, on Charlie Houston's recommendation, hired Thurgood Marshall. By 1955, when he died, he had been the association's National Executive Secretary, the position Mr. Nkume now holds, for 25 spectacular years. So identified with this organization that he had been called on occasion Mr. NAACP. He was, however, really Mr. Worldwide, because he saw early on, before Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or anyone else, that what happens to black people of color in one country happens to them all over the world, and for many of the same reasons. That the fight for civil rights must be global, not only local. He thought big. If he were alive today, he would be deeply concerned about the Arab policies in Darfur, as well as George Bush's refusal to appear at this conference. So, attention must be paid to a truly Renaissance man, and this fine wax figure is a wonderful start. He was unique in our collective black history. No matter how many civil rights activists there are, there will never be another Walter White. Thank you.